The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Emma Stone barely noticed as she stared at the stream of numbers flowing across her screen. The research station Prometheus hummed quietly around Jupiter's massive bulk, its automated systems maintaining perfect environmental conditions, while the small crew of 12 worked through their shifts. Emma wiped her tired eyes and leaned back in her chair, wondering if she should call it a night when something made her freeze. The pattern had changed. For 3 months, they had been monitoring deep space communications as part of humanity's expanding search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional pulsar, but this signal was different. It pulsed with mathematical precision, growing stronger by the minute, and it was coming from outside the galaxy entirely. "Tom, you need to see this," Emma called to her colleague across the cramped laboratory. Tom Harris pushed back from his own workstation, his thick glasses reflecting the glow of multiple monitors as he shuffled over. "What have you got?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. Emma pointed at the display where complex mathematical sequences scrolled past in neat columns. "It started about 10 minutes ago. Look at the pattern structure." Tom studied the data, his expression shifting from casual interest to intense focus. "These are prime number sequences, but they're embedded in something else. Some kind of translation. Matrix, maybe." Before Emma could respond, the signal changed again. The mathematical sequences began organizing themselves into recognizable patterns. Simple geometric shapes appeared on screen, followed by basic physics constants, then more complex. Information that made both scientists lean forward in amazement. "It's teaching us how to decode it," Emma whispered. The breakthrough came 20 minutes later, when the first words appeared in broken English. The translation was rough, clearly run through some kind of universal communication protocol, but the meaning was unmistakable. "Greetings, children of the third planet. I am Ambassador Thane of the Galactic Coalition. If you receive this message, our situation is desperate." Tom grabbed the intercom button. "Commander Williams to the lab. Priority 1. Reed Williams arrived within minutes, still wearing his sleeping clothes, but fully alert. The station commander was a former military officer who had transitioned to scientific research after the Mars missions, and his calm demeanor under pressure had kept Prometheus running smoothly for 2 years. "What do we have?" he asked, reading the translated text that now filled Emma's primary monitor. "First contact," Emma said simply, "and they need our help." The message continued streaming in, each new paragraph painting a picture of galactic civilization that was both wondrous and terrifying. The coalition consisted of 7 different species spread across dozens of worlds, all united in peaceful exploration and scientific advancement. Their technology surpassed humanity's by centuries, with faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and medical advances that had eliminated disease and aging. But they faced extinction. The Dominion had emerged from the galactic core 50 years ago, a militaristic empire that conquered through overwhelming force and psychological warfare. World after world had fallen to their advance, their populations either enslaved or eliminated. The coalition's peaceful nature had made them easy targets, their advanced technology useless against an enemy that struck without warning and showed no mercy. "Our worlds are not like yours," the message explained. "We evolved on gentle planets, with light gravity and stable climates. Our bones are hollow like your flying creatures, our muscles developed for precision rather than strength. What you would consider a mild day on your world would kill most of our people within hours." Ambassador Thane went on to describe Earth as classified in their databases as a death world, a planet so hostile that only the most dangerous species could survive there. The gravity alone was 3 times what most coalition species could endure for more than a few minutes. The temperature variations, the toxic atmosphere of oxygen that would burn through their lung tissues, the violent weather patterns, and the constant exposure to radiation from their star made Earth uninhabitable. by galactic standards. But these same conditions that make your world a place of death have forged you into something we desperately need. The message continued. Warriors. Reed felt a chill run down his spine as he read the description of humanity from an alien perspective. Humans were seen as apex predators, creatures whose very biology was designed for violence and survival. Their dense bone structure, redundant organ systems, and ability to function in extreme environments made them uniquely suited for warfare in ways the peaceful coalition could never match. The message included tactical assessments that were both flattering and disturbing. Human military history showed a species that had weaponized everything from sticks and stones to atomic energy. They fought in every possible environment, adapted to any condition, and never seemed to accept defeat as final. Where other species would surrender when faced with impossible odds, humans would find new ways to fight. The Dominion has never faced an enemy like you, Thane's message explained. They conquer through fear and overwhelming technological advantage. But their technology is designed to fight people like us, fragile beings who avoid conflict when possible. They have no experience with a species that thrives in hostile conditions and refuses to submit. The final section of the transmission contained detailed star charts and coordinates for the Coalition's last stronghold, a world called Haven on the rim of the galaxy. The Dominion fleet was massing for a final assault that would end the war. Within days, the Coalition's remaining forces were prepared to make their last stand, but they knew it was hopeless without help. We understand this is much to ask, the message concluded. You do not know us, and we offer little in return, except friendship and knowledge. But if there is any chance that the children of the killing world might hear our plea, we beg you to consider it. Time is running out, and you are our only hope. The transmission ended with technical specifications for faster-than-light communication protocols, and a promise to maintain an open channel for response. Then the lab fell silent, except for the quiet hum of electronics and the distant rumble of Jupiter's atmospheric storms. Reed stood quietly for a long moment, processing what they had just witnessed. First contact with alien civilization should have been the greatest moment in human history, but instead it came with a desperate plea for military intervention in a galactic war. We need to get this to Earth immediately, he finally said. Full priority transmission to command. Emma nodded and began preparing the data package. As she worked, she couldn't shake the image of fragile alien beings facing extinction while calling humanity their last hope. The children of the killing world, they had called them. She wondered if Ambassador Thane truly understood what he was asking for when he summoned the Deathworlders to war. The emergency session began at midnight Geneva time, with representatives from every major nation connected through secure quantum channels. President Martinez sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, studying the faces of world leaders who had been pulled from their beds to witness what might be humanity's most important decision. The alien transmission had reached Earth 6 hours ago, and the initial analysis was complete. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the Global Space Initiative, finished her presentation to the assembled leaders with a simple statement that carried enormous weight. The technology is real, the threat is real, and the request is real. We are looking at genuine first contact with a galactic civilization that sees us as their only hope for survival. Chancellor Berg of the European Federation leaned forward in her chair, her gray hair pulled back severely as she considered the implications. Dr. Chen, help us understand something. These aliens classify Earth as uninhabitable, yet they have faster-than-light travel and energy weapons. How is this possible? Dr. Chen pulled up a comparison chart showing the environmental conditions of coalition worlds versus Earth. Their evolution followed a completely different path than ours. Imagine if life on Earth had developed under perfect greenhouse conditions, with no natural disasters, stable weather, and gentle gravity. They became incredibly advanced intellectually, but they never needed to develop physical resilience. Prime Minister Okoye of the African Alliance spoke next, her voice thoughtful. What strikes me is their description of our world. They see us as living in hell, but thriving there. If we help them, what does that say about humanity's place in this galactic community? It makes us the galaxy's warriors, replied Admiral Torres, Earth's senior military commander. According to their data, no other species in the coalition has ever developed weapons meant to kill efficiently. Their technology is designed for construction, exploration, and research. Ours evolved from millions of years of survival competition. The discussion turned to practical considerations. General Knox pulled up tactical assessments, prepared by the Joint Military Staff. We have advantages they desperately need. Our weapons are designed for maximum damage with minimum resources. Our soldiers train in hostile environments as standard practice. Most importantly, we think tactically in ways they apparently cannot. President Martinez studied the star charts provided by Ambassador Thane. The distance is enormous. Even with their faster-than-light communication technology, it would take us months to reach their position using conventional fusion drives. But we could modify our existing fleet, suggested Minister Wei from the Pacific Alliance. The Mars colonial vessels have the basic framework. We could strip them down, add weapons systems, and carry enough personnel to make a difference. Dr. Chen activated another display showing human physiological data compared to coalition species. There's another factor we need to consider. According to their biological scans, an average human soldier could physically overpower 50 of their people without effort. Our bone density alone is 5 times theirs. We're not just resistant to their environmental conditions, we're practically invulnerable. By their standards. The room fell quiet as the leaders absorbed this information. They were discussing sending humans into space, not as explorers or diplomats, but as the galaxy's most effective warriors. Chancellor Berg raised the question everyone was thinking. What's to stop these coalition species from seeing us as a threat once the war is over? If we're so dangerous by their standards, won't they want to eliminate us eventually? That's a risk, admitted President Martinez. But consider the alternative. If the Dominion wins this war, they'll eventually expand toward our sector of the galaxy. We'll face them anyway, but alone instead of with allies. Admiral Torres activated a strategic overview of the galactic situation. The coalition offers something we've never had the chance to join a larger community as equals rather than primitives. Their technology could advance our civilization by centuries. The medical advances alone could end disease and extend human life indefinitely. Prime Minister Singh of the Indian Federation had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now he spoke with conviction. There's also the moral argument. We're talking about genocide on a galactic scale. Billions of sentient beings facing extinction. How can we not respond to that? The debate continued for hours, touching on logistics, ethics, and long-term consequences. The United Nations Security Council had dealt with many crises, but never one that would determine humanity's role among the stars. Finally, President Martinez called for a preliminary vote. All those in favor of authorizing a military response to the coalition's request. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, orders went out to military bases across Earth and the Mars colonies. The mission would be called Operation Deathworld, both as acknowledgement of the aliens' classification of Earth, and as a reminder of what made humanity unique in the galaxy. The fleet would consist of 15 heavy cruisers, converted from colony ships and mining vessels, along with 300 smaller craft ranging from fighters to support ships. 50,000 personnel would make the journey: Marines, soldiers, pilots, engineers, medics, and scientists. Admiral Torres accepted overall command, with General Knox leading ground operations and Dr. Chen heading the scientific mission. The time frame was impossibly tight. They needed to launch within 2 weeks to have any chance of reaching Haven before the Dominion's final assault. Across Earth, factories retooled to produce weapons and equipment for the mission. The arsenal included everything from handheld firearms to nuclear missiles, but also more specialized equipment designed for fighting in alien environments. Environmental suits that could function in conditions that would kill unprotected Coalition troops, medical supplies adapted for treating humans in extreme situations, and communication gear that could interface with Coalition technology. But perhaps most importantly, they prepared something the Coalition had never seen: human military doctrine adapted for interstellar warfare, where Coalition forces fought defensively and retreated when faced with superior numbers. Human tactics emphasized aggression, adaptation, and the willingness to take casualties to achieve objectives. As the preparations intensified, a response was sent to Ambassador Thane, using the communication protocols he had provided. The message was simple and direct. Message received. Help is coming. Hold your positions. Earth's children are on the way. The reply came back within hours, transmitted across impossible distances in real time. Thane's response, carried barely, contained hope and amazement. Your species' reputation for impossible things appears well-deserved. The Coalition awaits the Deathworlders with gratitude beyond expression. As Admiral Torres prepared for departure, she reflected on humanity's situation. They were about to enter a galactic war they knew nothing about, fighting alongside allies they had never met, against enemies whose capabilities remained largely unknown. By any reasonable analysis, it was madness. But reason had never been humanity's strongest trait. What made them dangerous? Their willingness to fight impossible odds, their refusal to accept defeat, their adaptation to hostile conditions might be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Haven system to find themselves in the middle of the largest space battle in recorded galactic history. Thousands of ships filled the void around the Garden World, their weapons lighting up space with deadly energy exchanges that had been continuing for weeks. Lieutenant Riley felt her stomach lurch as their transport ship shuddered under the impact of stray weapons fire. Through the observation port, she could see the Coalition fleet, graceful vessels that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Their hulls gleaming with smooth curves and elegant proportions. They moved in perfect formations, firing precise shots at predetermined intervals. The Dominion fleet was the complete opposite. Their ships were brutal geometric shapes, all angles and armor plating, built for intimidation as much as combat. They advanced in overwhelming waves, absorbing casualties, while delivering devastating firepower that slowly pushed the Coalition forces back toward Haven's atmosphere. Admiral Torres studied the tactical display from the bridge of the converted cruiser Defiance. The Coalition was losing badly, their beautiful ships outgunned and overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Their defensive strategy might work against an enemy that fought by their rules. But the Dominion showed no interest in civilized warfare. Open a channel to both fleets, she ordered. Full broadcast, all frequencies. The communication came through clearly to both sides. This is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet, responding to Ambassador Thane's request for assistance. Coalition forces, please identify your command ship. Dominion forces, you have one opportunity to withdraw from this system. The response from the Coalition came immediately. Ambassador Thane's voice, carried across space, filled with relief and amazement. Admiral Torres, this is Ambassador Thane aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony. We are honored by your arrival, though I confess surprise at your fleet's appearance. Thane was right to be surprised. Where Coalition ships were elegant and Dominion vessels were intimidating, the human fleet looked improvised and dangerous. Colony ships had been fitted with weapons that stuck out at odd angles. Mining equipment had been converted to military use, and everything had the rough, functional appearance of tools built for survival rather than display. The Dominion response came with contempt. I am Overlord Raven of the Dominion Warfleet. Whatever primitive species you represent, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. We have no interest in prolonging this conflict unnecessarily. Admiral Torres smiled grimly. Overlord Raven, you're about to get an education in unnecessary conflict. All human vessels, engage at will. Show them what Deathworlders do to bullies. The first human weapons fired simultaneously across the fleet, and the nature of the battle changed instantly, where Coalition weapons fired single, precisely aimed energy beams. Human ships unleashed torrents of kinetic rounds, missiles, and particle beams. The attack patterns seemed chaotic and random, but they were devastatingly effective. Human fighters swarmed through Dominion formations like angry insects, their pilots pushing acceleration and maneuvers that would have killed Coalition crew members. Lieutenant Commander Nash led his squadron in a dive straight through the center of a Dominion battle group, his fighters weaving between massive capital ships while delivering attacks at point-blank range. On the Coalition flagship, Ambassador Thane watched in amazement as human tactics unfolded. The Dominion had expected another defensive enemy that would retreat when pressed. Instead, human ships advanced into overwhelming firepower, absorbed damage that should have destroyed them, and kept fighting with equipment that should have failed hours ago. How are they surviving those impacts? Asked his tactical officer, a delicate being whose species had evolved on a world with half Earth's gravity. Thane studied the sensor readings showing human ship construction. Their vessels are built like their people, dense, redundant, and incredibly resilient. Look at the hull thickness, the backup systems, the sheer robustness of their engineering. The space battle raged for 6 hours, with human reinforcements arriving in waves as the fleet's full strength deployed. But the real test came when Admiral Torres ordered ground operations to begin. Lieutenant Riley found herself leading a platoon of Marines toward Haven's surface aboard a modified landing craft. The planet below was beautiful beyond description. Vast forests of crystalline trees, lakes that sparkled like jewels, and cities that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. But the Dominion had established beachheads across 3 continents, their ground forces pushing inland toward population centers, while Coalition defenders fell back constantly. Riley's platoon landed in a combat zone that should have been impossible to survive. The Dominion was using atmospheric processors that filled the air with toxic gases, meant to eliminate Coalition resistance. The temperature had been raised to levels that killed most Coalition species within minutes, and the gravity generators were set to maximum output for the human Marines. It was uncomfortable, but manageable. Atmospheric readings show poison levels that would kill Coalition troops in seconds, reported Sergeant Blake, checking his instruments. Temperature is 45 degrees Celsius. Gravity is 2.3 standard. Basically Tuesday on Mars. Riley's platoon moved through conditions that had stopped entire Coalition armies, where alien defenders had been forced to retreat. Humans advanced steadily through toxic fog and crushing gravity while maintaining combat effectiveness. The first encounter with Dominion ground forces showed the enemy's confusion. Dominion soldiers were physically impressive by Coalition standards, taller and stronger than most species, with natural armor plating and weapons integrated into their biology. They had expected to face the same fragile beings they had conquered across the galaxy. Instead, they found humans who fought in environmental conditions that should have killed them, absorbed weapons fire that would have vaporized Coalition troops, and kept advancing even when critically wounded. Private Anderson took a direct hit from a Dominion energy weapon that carved a groove across his chest armor. Instead of falling, he returned fire with his assault rifle and kept moving. The Dominion soldier stared in shock as the human shrugged off an attack that would have instantly killed any Coalition warrior. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Dominion had built their entire military doctrine around fear and intimidation. They conquered by demonstrating overwhelming superiority that made resistance seem hopeless. But humans responded to overwhelming odds by fighting harder. When Dominion forces deployed their feared psychological weapons, fear toxins that paralyzed most species with terror, they discovered that humans produced their own combat drugs. Naturally, adrenaline made them faster, stronger, and more aggressive, instead of incapacitating them. Lieutenant Riley coordinated the defense of a coalition refugee center that housed thousands of alien civilians. The beings she was protecting were so fragile that even her normal speaking voice could damage their hearing, but their intelligence and kindness were immediately obvious. A young coalition child, no bigger than a human infant, but clearly sentient, approached her with something that looked like a flower made of living light. "Thank you for helping us," the child said in perfect English, somehow having learned the language from the translation protocols. "Are you really from the killing world?" Riley knelt down carefully, making sure not to accidentally harm the delicate being we call it Earth. And yes, it's a dangerous place. But dangerous places make strong people, and strong people protect others. As human forces consolidated their positions across Haven, reports flowed in from across the battlefront. Everywhere Dominion forces had expected easy victories, they instead found humans who thrived in hostile conditions and refused to retreat. The tide of the war was turning, but Overlord Raven was already planning his response. The humans were formidable opponents, but they were still vastly outnumbered. If they wanted to fight like Deathworlders, he would give them a war that would test even their legendary resilience. 3 weeks after the liberation of Haven, Colonel West received orders that would have seemed impossible before humanity joined the Galactic War. His regiment was being deployed to Chains, a frozen prison world that the Dominion used to hold their most dangerous captives. The planet's surface temperature never rose above -40 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere was toxic to most known species, and the gravitational field was twice Earth standard. The Coalition had written off the prisoners there as unreachable. The Dominion considered the world impregnable. Both were about to learn what happened when humans decided someone needed rescuing. West's transport ship descended through Chains' howling ice storms, while Coalition observers watched from orbit. Ambassador Thane had insisted on monitoring the mission personally, still struggling to understand how these creatures from the killing world accomplished impossible things with such casual efficiency. "Colonel West, our sensors show surface conditions that would kill my people in minutes," Thane transmitted. "How do you intend to survive long enough to reach the prison complex?" West's reply came back with typical human understatement. "Ambassador, my soldiers trained in Alaska. This is just Alaska with worse weather. The human landing force deployed in conditions that looked like the end of the world. Ice storms reduced visibility to zero. The cold was intense enough to shatter most materials, and the toxic atmosphere would have dissolved Coalition lung tissue in seconds. The humans sealed their environmental suits and got to work. Within hours, they had established a base camp and begun their advance toward the prison complex. The Dominion guards, safe behind energy shields and heating systems, watched their approach with growing disbelief. The attacking force was moving through a blizzard that should have stopped any military operation, maintaining formation and combat effectiveness in conditions that would have been instantly fatal to the defenders themselves. The assault on Chains became a legend throughout the galaxy. Human soldiers advanced through ice storms that grounded aircraft, maintained their weapons in temperatures that froze most lubricants solid, and fought hand-to-hand battles in environments that would have killed their opponents in minutes. Sergeant Martinez led her squad through the prison complex's outer defenses, while ice crystals formed on her armor. The Dominion had built their defenses, assuming any attacking force would need the same environmental protection they required. Human soldiers simply ignored the environmental systems and punched through walls the defenders thought were impregnable. The liberation of Chains freed over 50,000 Coalition prisoners, including several key military commanders and scientists the Dominion had captured during earlier battles. But more importantly, it established what coalition forces began calling the Deathworlder Doctrine, the principle that humans could fight and win in conditions where no other species could survive. Back on Haven, Dr. Stone worked with coalition scientists to understand the broader implications of human involvement in the war. The research facility they shared was a marvel of alien technology, but the discoveries they were making together exceeded anything either species had achieved alone. "Your psychological profiles are fascinating," explained Dr. Vale, a coalition researcher whose species had evolved advanced empathic abilities. When most beings face overwhelming danger, they experience fear that reduces their effectiveness. Humans experience fear that enhances their combat capabilities. Dr. Stone pulled up neurological scans taken during combat situations. "We call it the fight or flight response. But humans developed a variant that's more accurately described as fight or flight. Our brain chemistry actually improves our physical performance when we're terrified." The research had practical applications beyond academic interest. Coalition forces were learning to coordinate with human units in ways that maximized both species' advantages, while coalition technology provided superior sensors, communications, and logistics. Human tactical thinking provided adaptability and aggressive strategies that the Dominion couldn't counter. Admiral Torres studied intelligence reports from across the war zone while planning their next major operation. The conflict had spread to dozens of star systems as word of human effectiveness encouraged coalition resistance movements throughout Dominion space. On the industrial world of Nexus, human engineers worked alongside coalition technicians to make new weapons that combined the best of both species' technology. The resulting equipment was devastating. Coalition precision married to human stopping power, creating weapons that could punch through Dominion defenses while remaining reliable in extreme conditions. Lieutenant Commander Park led a fighter squadron equipped with the new hybrid technology. Her pilots flew modified coalition craft with human weapon systems, combining the aliens' superior speed and maneuverability with humanity's talent for destructive innovation. "The difference is philosophical," she explained to her squadron during a briefing. "Coalition weapons are designed to disable with minimal damage. Our weapons are designed to make sure the target stops fighting permanently." The war's momentum continued shifting as human forces spread across multiple fronts. On the ocean world of depths, human marines demonstrated their species' adaptability by fighting underwater battles against Dominion forces who had never imagined combat in such conditions. The aliens' high-technology equipment functioned perfectly in controlled environments but failed catastrophically when subjected to the improvised tactics and harsh conditions humans considered normal. Captain Rodriguez led amphibious assaults through crushing depths and toxic seas while Dominion defenders watched helplessly from their sealed habitats. The enemy had powerful weapons and superior numbers, but they couldn't fight effectively outside their environmental comfort zones. The psychological impact of human success began affecting Dominion morale across the galaxy. For 3,000 years, their military had conquered through the simple expedient of being bigger, stronger, and more ruthless than anyone they encountered. Now, they faced enemies who treated their most extreme environmental weapons as minor inconveniences and responded to intimidation by becoming more dangerous. But Overlord Raven was adapting to the new reality. Intelligence reports reached Admiral Torres, showing massive Dominion fleet movements toward their home system of Throne, rather than continue fighting a war they couldn't win using conventional tactics. The Dominion was consolidating their forces for a single decisive battle. They were calling every ship, every soldier, every weapon to defend their capital, General Knox reported during the daily strategic briefing. "If we can break their defensive Throne, we end the war. If we fail, they'll have time to develop countermeasures for our advantages." The coalition's remaining leadership gathered on Haven to debate their response. The proposal Admiral Torres presented would have seemed like madness to any military force in galactic history, a direct assault on the most heavily defended world in known space, protected by defenses that had never been breached, and a fleet larger than any ever assembled. Ambassador Thane listened to the human plan with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Admiral, you're suggesting we attack their strongest position with our entire remaining force. If we fail, the coalition ceases to exist." Torres smiled with the same expression that had made human predators successful for millions of years. "Ambassador, you called us for help because we're dangerous. This is what dangerous looks like. We don't win by playing it safe. We win by doing things nobody else would even consider." The vote to authorize Operation Throne was unanimous among coalition leadership, but several species privately wondered if they were following their human allies toward salvation or disaster. The children of the Killing World had proven they could win battles in impossible conditions, but they were about to test whether they could win an impossible war. As the combined human coalition fleet prepared for departure, Dr. Stone sent a final research report back to Earth. Her conclusions would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. They weren't just another species that had developed space travel. They were evolution's answer to a universe that demanded warriors. The combined human coalition fleet emerged from faster than light travel at the edge of the throne system to face a sight that should have sent any sane military force retreating immediately. The Dominion capital world hung in space like a black jewel, surrounded by defensive installations that stretched from the inner planets to the asteroid belt. Energy barriers flickered between massive fortress stations, while patrol fleets moved in perfect formations that had defended this system for millennia. General Knox studied the tactical display from the command deck of the assault carrier Victory, watching as more Dominion reinforcements continued arriving. The enemy had recalled their entire military to this final battleground, creating the largest concentration of firepower in galactic history. 15,000 Dominion vessels confirmed, reported the tactical officer, her voice professionally calm despite the impossible odds they faced. Orbital defense platforms number in the hundreds. Energy shield coverage is complete from surface to outer system perimeter. The human battle plan defied every principle of military strategy known to galactic civilization. Instead of attempting to break through the orbital defenses or engage the massive enemy fleet in traditional space combat, Admiral Torres had ordered something that no military commander in 3,000 years had even considered. They were going to ignore the fleet and attack the planet directly. All assault transports begin atmospheric entry procedures, Torres commanded from the Bridge of Defiance. Fighter squadrons provide close escort. Capital ships maintain fleet engagement to draw enemy fire away from ground operations. Overlord Raven watched the human approach from his command center, deep within Throne's planetary defenses, his tactical displays showing what appeared to be military suicide on an unprecedented scale. The humans were sending their ground forces directly into the teeth of his most powerful weapons, while their fleet engaged in a hopeless battle against overwhelming odds. "They're falling into our trap perfectly," he informed his subordinates with satisfaction. "Focus all orbital weapons on their transport ships. Destroy them before they can land." But the humans had learned much about Dominion psychology during their campaigns across the galaxy. The enemy expected their opponents to value their own lives above military objectives, to retreat when faced with unacceptable casualties, and to fight defensively when overwhelmed. Human military doctrine had developed along completely different lines. Lieutenant Riley pressed herself against the restraint harness as their transport ship bucked and rolled through Throne's defensive fire. Around her, 50 Marines checked their weapons and equipment one final time, while energy blasts exploded close enough to shake the entire vessel. Through the observation ports, she could see other transports taking direct hits and breaking apart. But more kept coming. 2 minutes, 2 touchdown. announced their pilot with the casual tone humans used when discussing violent death. "Looks like we're landing in a hot zone." Opposition estimated at 5,000 Dominion ground troops with full defensive positions. The Marine beside Riley, a veteran of the Chain's liberation, named Corporal Davis, laughed grimly. 5,000 against 50. Almost seems fair. The transport hit Throne's surface hard, its landing thrusters struggling to compensate for battle damage and the planet's heavy gravity. The rear doors blasted open immediately, and Riley led her Marines into hell. Throne's surface was a monument. 2 Dominion power towers of black metal stretching toward the sky, energy conduits running between massive installations, and defensive positions that had been built over centuries to repel any conceivable attack. The gravity was crushing, the atmosphere was toxic, and the temperature was held at levels designed to kill most galactic species within minutes. For humans who had trained on Mars, it was Tuesday. With hostile architecture, the Dominion defenders had prepared for traditional assault tactics, coordinated advances with heavy weapon support, careful coordination between air and ground forces, and systematic reduction of defensive positions. What they got was human squad-level tactics applied to planetary assault. Riley's Marines advanced through a cityscape designed to channel attackers into killing zones, but they didn't follow the expected routes. Instead, they went through buildings, under streets, and over structures that weren't designed to support combat operations. Human soldiers moved through Throne's urban environment, like water finding cracks in stone, appearing where the defenders never expected, and fighting in ways that made their superior numbers irrelevant. Sergeant Blake led his team through what had been a civilian sector before the Dominion evacuated it for the final battle. The enemy had stationed defensive positions at every major intersection and choke point. But humans didn't need roads to advance. "Contact front," reported one of his Marines, as Dominion soldiers emerged from a fortified building. The enemy weapons opened fire immediately. Energy blasts that would have vaporized any coalition troops. Blake's team returned fire with weapons that had been designed for maximum lethality in minimum time. The philosophical difference between human and coalition military technology became apparent as human ammunition punched through Dominion defenses that had been built to stop precision energy weapons, not kinetic rounds designed for overkill. Battle for Throne's surface raged across every continent as human forces pushed toward the planetary command center where Overlord Raven had made his final headquarters. The Dominion threw everything they had at the advancing humans' orbital. Bombardment, chemical weapons, gravity manipulation, and psychological warfare that had broken every previous enemy. Nothing worked. Colonel West coordinated the assault on the Central Command Complex, while his troops advanced through conditions that would have stopped any other military force in the galaxy. The Dominion had turned their own capital into a death trap, but they had designed it to kill beings who couldn't survive in hostile environments. "Status report," he requested from his field commanders as explosions lit up the night sky around them. "3rd Battalion has breached the outer perimeter," reported Major Singh. "Resistance is heavy, but they're falling back faster than expected." "1st Battalion is advancing through the industrial sector," added Major Kim. "Enemy forces keep retreating when we press forward instead of standing and fighting." Wes nodded grimly. The Dominion's greatest weapon had always been their reputation for invincibility. When that failed, they discovered they had no experience with determined resistance. The final assault began at dawn, on Throne's longest day, with human forces converging on the Central Command Complex from 6 different directions. The Dominion's last line of defense consisted of their most elite troops, warriors who had conquered worlds and broken entire species through sheer intimidation. They had never faced humans before. Riley found herself leading the spearhead assault. Through the complex's main entrance, a massive archway designed to impress visitors with Dominion grandeur, the defenders had turned it into a killing field, with overlapping fields of fire and defensive positions that should have made advancement impossible. Her Marines went through it like it was a training exercise. Move fast, stay low, watch for crossfire. She called to her team as they advanced through energy blasts that lit up the corridor like lightning. The Dominion weapons were powerful and precise, but they were designed for enemies who took cover and fought defensively. Humans just kept coming. The breakthrough came when Corporal Davis led a flanking maneuver through what the Dominion had considered an impossible route, straight up the exterior wall of the command tower, while under fire from multiple defensive positions. His team scaled a 100-meter vertical surface in full combat gear, something the enemy architects had never imagined anyone would attempt. Breaching charges set on the upper floors, he reported over the comm channel. Ready to blow a nuke door. The explosion shook the entire complex as Davis's team punched through reinforced walls that were supposed to withstand orbital bombardment. Suddenly the Dominion defenders found themselves fighting on multiple levels simultaneously, while human forces poured in through entrances that weren't supposed to exist. In space above Throne, the battle had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Admiral Torres had spread her fleet across the entire system, forcing the Dominion to divide their overwhelming numerical advantage, while human ships fought running battles through asteroid fields and around gas giants. The key to human space tactics wasn't superior technology or numbers. It was the willingness to fight in conditions where their opponents couldn't follow. Human pilots pursued enemy ships through radiation fields that would have killed coalition crews, while human captains maintained combat operations with damage levels that should have forced immediate retreat. Captain Miller guided her damaged cruiser through Throne's outer asteroid belt while 3 Dominion vessels pursued her. Her ship had lost main engines, half her weapon systems were offline, and her hull had been breached in 16 places. By Dominion standards, she should have surrendered hours ago. Instead, she was leading the enemy into an ambush. Contact, bearing 27 Mark IV, reported her tactical officer. Friendly vessels moving to intercept. The Dominion ships found themselves caught between Miller's damaged cruiser and 2 human destroyers that had been hiding among the asteroids. What followed was point-blank space combat that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Ships ramming each other, weapons fired at ranges measured in meters, and damage levels that would have been impossible between any other species. When the engagement ended, 1 Dominion vessel was completely destroyed, and the other 2 were retreating toward the inner system. Miller's cruiser was barely functional, but it was still fighting. Back on Throne's surface, the final confrontation was approaching as human forces reached the heart of the command complex. Overlord Raven had retreated to his personal command center, a fortress within a fortress that had been built to withstand any conceivable attack. Colonel West studied the tactical situation as his forces surrounded the final Dominion stronghold. Intelligence reports showed that Raven had approximately 500 elite guards with him, along with the most advanced weapons the Dominion possessed. "Sir, recommend we call for orbital bombardment," suggested his aide. "Take out the entire complex from space." West shook his head. "Negative. This needs to be personal. The galaxy needs to see that the Dominion's leadership can be defeated face to face." The assault on Raven's command center became the stuff of legend. Human soldiers advanced through corridors designed to showcase Dominion power, past monuments to conquered worlds and defeated species. The psychological warfare that had broken countless civilizations meant nothing to troops who had grown up on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. Riley kicked down the door to Raven's final position, her Marines flooding in behind her as the last Dominion resistance crumbled. The Overlord himself stood in the center of his command chamber, surrounded by displays showing the collapse of his empire across the galaxy. He was impressive by galactic standards, nearly 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating and weapons built into his biology. He had personally led the conquest of dozens of worlds and had never known defeat, but he had never faced a human. Marine, who was angry about friends lost in the fighting. The confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Raven's integrated weapons were powerful enough to have killed any coalition warrior instantly, but Riley absorbed the hits and kept advancing. When she reached him, the physical confrontation demonstrated the same fundamental difference that had defined the entire war. Raven was strong by the standards of a galaxy where most species were physically fragile. Riley was strong by the standards of a world where survival required constant adaptation to hostile conditions. The fight ended with Overlord Raven's surrender, broadcast across every Dominion communication channel in the galaxy. Within hours, reports flooded in from across Dominion space. Worlds that had been held in submission for centuries declared independence. Military units that had never questioned orders suddenly found themselves without clear leadership. The empire that had seemed invincible began collapsing as quickly as it had expanded. Admiral Torres stood in Raven's former command center, watching as Ambassador Thane coordinated with coalition forces throughout the galaxy. The war was ending not with a negotiated settlement, but with the complete collapse of an empire that had considered itself unbeatable. "Your species has changed everything," Thane said, turning from the communication displays. "Not just by winning this war, but by showing the galaxy that tyranny can be defeated through courage and determination." Torres nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "The real test comes next. The Dominion fell because they relied on fear and intimidation. We need to make sure the coalition doesn't make the same mistake with us." As human and coalition forces worked together to establish order in the former Dominion territories, a new message was transmitted across the galaxy. This time it came not from a desperate plea for help, but from the combined leadership of a free galactic community. To any civilization that believes might makes right, that the strong should dominate the weak, we have a simple message. The broadcast began. "The children of the killing world stand ready to prove you wrong. To any people facing oppression, any species fighting for freedom, we offer alliance and friendship. The galaxy belongs to all who would live in peace." The transmission ended with coordinates for the new Galactic Defense Council, where human and coalition representatives would work together to ensure that no empire could ever again threaten the freedom of entire civilizations. Riley stood at the observation deck of the Victory as it prepared for the journey back to Earth, watching as human and alien ships worked together to repair the damage of war. The galaxy was a bigger place than anyone on Earth had imagined, but it was also smaller in the ways that mattered. Courage, determination, and the willingness to fight for others were universal values. The children of the killing world had simply reminded everyone what they looked like in practice.